Today we're going to do a watercolor painting that's a still life of oranges. I am starting with a gessoed cradled board, and you can buy them pre-gessoed or you can get a wooden board and put the gesso on yourself. The reason why I'm doing it on a board instead of a piece of paper is I'm going to do a painting with watercolor, and then I'm going to coat it with beeswax paint, which is called encaustic paint. If you don't want to do the encaustic, this would also be a beautiful picture just on watercolor paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a line across my board, and I'm doing it at the 2/3 mark. That's just a trick that kind of is a good spot to make it a little more interesting than if you made the table line right halfway in the middle. Then I'm going to draw my oranges. Drawing a circle I find to be pretty hard. So the way that I do it is I try to keep my wrist stiff. I keep my elbow kind of stiff, and I try to move from my shoulder. If you picture your shoulder, it's got a socket, ball and socket, and it just kind of helps me make good circles. And everything you draw is circles or straight lines. So it's pretty important. I'm putting my oranges overlapping a little bit, and then I'm going to have one coming off the page here at the bottom. I don't want to have them exactly the same, so I'm going to put my little, what's it called? A little nubbin? The area that was stuck to the tree. I'm going to put it in different areas on the different oranges. This one's up here. I don't need to draw too many details with my pencil because I'm going to do it with my paintbrush, but that's what I've got so far. Now I'm going to take an eraser and erase out my table line, so I just have my oranges. Now I like to use either these Prang watercolors, and they're under $5, and I think they're very vibrant colors. Or sometimes I use these Winsor & Newton travel colors. You can use the squeeze kind of paints, and those are really nice too. I'm not great at putting the lids on, so that's why I normally go with this. And then I'm going to use a selection of brushes. I usually use rounds and flats. And it's nice to have some rounds that still have a point. The way you keep the point is you try to dry them in a point, and then they'll stay that way. So I'm going to take kind of a mid-range size 8 paintbrush, get it wet, and then I'm going to mix my colors because I want an orange. This set comes with a cadmium red, which is pretty orange, but I'm going to add some of this yellow ochre to it, which is one of my favorite colors. It's actually my husband's favorite color, which is, you know, not your everyday thing. That's why I knew he was a keeper. So I've mixed a good color, and I don't necessarily want to mix it all the way through. It's pretty interesting if you have some variety. I'm just going to go around here on the outside. And then I shake out a little bit of my the pigment into the water, and I just take pure water and pull it in. Now if my paint is getting out of control, I can dab it with a paper towel. I'm going to try to leave a little bit of a blank area, white area in the center. I can always make it darker, but with watercolor, the trick is to leave some of the white of the page. Now, if you're doing it on a gessoed surface like I am, the watercolor behaves completely differently than it does on a paper. And it just takes a little bit of getting used to. It's more like painting with acrylic. It's kind of, the gesso is like primer on a wall. It gives it a little bit of a tooth to grab onto, so it doesn't soak into the page as much. And then if I've got a little area I'm not crazy about or it's too wet, I use the corner of the paper towel and that soaks it up. Now I'm gonna let that one dry and then I'm gonna add a little more layers. I'm gonna add a little more yellow. And I'm gonna do that to all my oranges. I want them to look individual. So I'm gonna kind of look back at my original orange, and sometimes I'll kind of squint at it to see the lights and darks. On this one, I've got a lot more wrinkles here on the top part. So I'm doing that, and then I'm also going to do the same thing where I make the outside a little bit darker, and then use water to bring it in towards the center. I'm gonna add a little pure, of the ochre. Got a little too much. There we go. So I just shake it out when it gets, if it's a little too dark. Just shake it out of my water. I don't usually load a lot of paint onto my brush after I first start a stroke. I'll put a dark stroke down and then I'll lighten it with the just pure water out of the bucket and see how that does, if I can pull it. Use the clear water to pull it towards the center. It's looking pretty good. This is, in college we had to do still lifes. I mean, probably for a year. And we studied Cezanne. Cezanne was the father of modern art. And he would do still life paintings, and but he would arrange things around, and he was more interested in just creating an interesting composition than in making something look totally realistic. And then my last one over here is just coming off the page. I'm just gonna do sort of a C shape on that one. Then shake a little bit out and see if I can pull it in. Oh yeah, I like that. Now I'm gonna go back to the second one, needs some more darks. It's got a area of darker right here. And a little shadow from that orange onto the one before. I actually need to move that there so I can see it, the way the shadows go in real life. I try not to use black when I'm doing watercolor. That's just how I learned that you don't use black or white. You try to use the white of the paper as your lightest things, and then the black for the dark areas you can use a complementary color. So the opposite of orange is blue, so I could use blue for some of my darks, or I could also use just anything a little bit darker, like brown or green or whatever looks good. So this one I'm going to keep on just adding more layers, and then I'm gonna let these dry very well before I put the little green tops on them. So I'm gonna go for the background. This edge is pretty good. I think I can go ahead and do the background. I'm gonna take a little bit of ultramarine, which is more of a purpley blue, and then cobalt blue, and maybe a tiny smidge of green, so it doesn't look too one note. And so I'm going to put this here at the table line and add a little water and see if I can pull it up. Woo. And I'm making because I'm going to cover this one with beeswax, I'm making my colors a little bit more vibrant than I normally would, because the beeswax is going to add a yellowish, kind of a muted tone over it. So it can take away a little bit of the brightness. So that's why I'm making them a little garish perhaps, but I think it's gonna work out in the end. And then I'm going to take the same color, maybe I'll add a little bit of alizarin crimson to add a little bit of purplish color, and I'm going to make shadows underneath each fruit. So I'm going to look back at how they are, because there's multiple light sources in this room. I have a shadow coming out like this, and then there's a second shadow coming this way. And you can draw that first with a pencil if you'd prefer. A little bit of mix. This one's here. And this one over here. Now I don't want my shadow to come all the way up to the blue wall behind. So this one I'm just going to do a little tiny particle. I'm going to leave a gap there. I bled a little bit. The watercolor, I mean, the nature of it is to be runny and look like it flows and looks like it wasn't misery painting it. They're supposed to look fast and kind of happy. So where I've got some accidents, a little orange went into the background, a little blue in here. I think that's actually going to work for me. So I'm going to keep them and try not to stress about it. I'm doing a little bit of pure cadmium to try to get this line. And then if you're really impatient, you can hit it with your hairdryer, and then you can go ahead and jump onto the next part. I'm gonna use a little bit of this yellow green here, and I'm gonna add some yellow. And I'm gonna go ahead and make my little tiny leaves. That's so cute. And this one here. The reason why I put the oranges on the edge of the tabletop is that kind of breaks the plane, and it makes them actually look more realistic than if everything was looked at from above. It's harder to look three-dimensional that way. Just adding a little green on that one. So, if you don't like it, you can dab it back. You can't get it all the way back to the paper, but you can get it pretty close. Ooh, I like it. That really helped. And then if it's got a dry area, a too wet area, you can just maybe let it dry for a second. And then it won't be working on wet on wet. You'll be working wet on dry, which is much easier to control. I like it. I'm gonna let this dry for a little bit and then move over to the Encaustic beeswax. My painting has dried, and now is a good time. If you want to sign your painting, sign it before you put the wax on. Once the wax is on, it's on. So traditional signatures and watercolor is with pencil. So I'm just gonna sign my name in the bottom right hand side of my canvas board, brush board, and dot the I. Now, I'm going to take this Encaustic medium, which is beeswax and damar resin. Now, I'm putting it into a hot plate that I got on sale at a big box store because it didn't have a lid, but I don't need a lid. And then I've got a tuna can. That's free. And I just put a little bit in here. I'm putting it, you can just put it everywhere, but keeping it in the tuna can helps contain it. And then when you work with multiple colors, you'll have tons of tuna cans for working with it. On this, I'm just gonna make it clear. So I stir it up a little bit. I've got my hot plate on. And once these little nibbly bits get smooth, then I go ahead and put it in there, my brush. Your brush is gonna be ruined, so don't use a nice brush. But it's good to use a brush that's good enough that the bristles won't come out, because it's kind of gross when there's hair stuck in wax. And I'm just gonna paint. It doesn't matter if you want it in one direction. Sometimes I make it really perfect in one direction. Sometimes I do it in different directions. You're gonna, after you paint the wax on, you're gonna melt it a second time. It goes on melted and then you fuse it. And I don't know why, but that's what you have to do to make it really bond with the medium and the substrate, whatever you're painting on. Now, encaustic was first started by the ancient Greeks, and they would use beeswax to seal their ships. And then they started adding pigments to it because humans are always doing stuff like that, making things cute. So they fused it with the sun, I'm sure. So you don't have to fuse it too much, but you can just get it a little melted, and that helps it all kind of bond together. So I'm done there. Put my brush up here, and I'm gonna get a heat gun. They sell encaustic heat guns. This is one that I have from the hardware store. And when I'm fusing it, I tend to go in a circular motion, and I don't know if you can see there, it gets a little shiny, and you can start to see it. All your brush strokes fade away. They all just kind of melt together. And if you mess up, you can melt it all the way off and just scrape it off, and you can save that beeswax and use it again. But for this, it's just making sort of a coating. I'm doing this instead of framing my piece. Encaustic is a great sealant. This is what's on the cover of ancient Egyptian burial tombs. So it really lasts. It does take a year to cure. So over the period of the year, while it's curing, sometimes the wax will do something called bloom. And you'll look at your picture and it looks a little bit faded. And what you want to do when that happens is get a soft cloth and kind of buff it a little bit. And then it will be really shiny again. And then after the year is up, it's finished going through those stages, and it's set forever. Unless you leave it in your car, in which case you're in trouble. That's about it. I've dropped a little bit, but oops, there's a drip right there. I'm gonna get that one out. And you can always go back and just remelt it. So I'm gonna let it sit right there. Before I started, I forgot to tell you all this, I put a little piece of masking tape around the edge. So that way I don't have wax dripping all down the sides. And that's personal preference. Sometimes it looks kind of cool. But if you want a nice clean side, you can put masking tape there, and then you can peel it off at the end. Just very satisfying. So I'm gonna pull that off. And here I have my picture. Maybe I should keep pulling it.